Bonjour, je m'appelle Catherine.
Hi, my name is Catherine Hubert. This is my business, Chez, Genèse, where I am the restaurant owner, chef, and disability integration coach.
The number one question that we get in this restaurant is, who waters your plants? The number two question that we get in this restaurant is, who speaks French? Which is a very fair question, seeing as we are a French-inspired restaurant in Greensboro, North Carolina. Our name is French. Our food is, I say French-inspired because not everything is classically French, but by and large, very French in our concept, in the way that our space is set up, in the way that our food is prepared, in the food that we have on our menu, etc. But I'm not French. I really, really wish that I was. I did live in France for a year in my early 20s, which is why this restaurant is French-inspired. And today we are going to be diving into why French food is about so much more than just the food itself, the meaning specifically that French food holds for me, and then what I think French food brings to our world in general. So, what do we normally think of when we think of French food? I think a lot of the foods that people think of are kind of your classic croissants, coffee, frog legs, right? Snails. But some of the other words or feelings that maybe people oftentimes, at least Americans, associate with French food are more fine dining experiences. It can be pretentious, it could be snobby, maybe a feeling of trepidation around French food, like I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to like it because I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to know what it is. Pate, like do I want to eat organ meat? Some of those kind of questions. And it's fine to feel a sense of awkwardness or uncertainty around a food or a culture that isn't your own. However, I do think that French food is so much more than the cliche. It is so much more than what maybe Americans typically think of right off the bat. And so today I want to dig a little bit into why French food is really important in general. It's not just important to me, but then also specifically why it's important to me and this restaurant. Number one of the reasons why French food is so important is that France as a whole holds a lot of historical importance and value in terms of what our modern day restaurants look like. Restaurants didn't used to be a thing, at least not in the way that they are set up and utilized and run today. But during the time of the French Revolution, when chefs really were something of royalty, people who were really wealthy and the royalty had the means to have chefs and have people who were cooking and preparing their food for them. During the time of the French Revolution, when the French people were like, we don't love the fact that our king and our queen are living in opulence and luxury and we're out here starving in the streets. And so they overthrew the palace and they killed their king and queen. Then there were all of these chefs who were out of work. They didn't have a job anymore. So they took to the streets of Paris and they opened up their own restaurants, and then the artistry, the mastery, the experience and the expertise of these chefs that originally had only been accessible to the really wealthy or to the royals were now accessible to the people. And so that created a cultural shift in terms of what kind of access and availability just that every man had to experts in the kitchen and to having people actually being able to pay for someone to provide a meal or a service to you. So that obviously has changed the world in a pretty significant way. And then a second way that France has been really impactful in terms of what cuisine and the culinary arts look like in general is that a lot of the basics of culinary arts and science comes out of France and comes out of French cooking. It doesn't mean that it is all encompassing to what the culinary arts look like. Obviously not. There's food and delicious food that comes from every country and every culture. But France has been really foundational in terms of providing a lot of the building blocks that cuisine recognized around the world utilizes and has built off of. So that's something if you've gone to culinary school, if you've taken cooking classes, you will see French cuisine as being really foundational to the courses, to the instruction, because you're building off of the sauces that come out of France. You're building off of a lot of the cooking techniques and the understanding around food preparation that's based out of French culture and recipes. All of that being said, on just a practical level and a foundational level, France means a lot to the world in the way that we interact with food and the food that we consume. And then moving out from there, and specifically to me, why is French cuisine so important? When I think of France and when I think of French food, I think the opposite of what I think a lot of those initial cliche responses are of. It's snobby, it's pretentious. I actually think of warmth and hospitality. My experience in France was so inviting. There's so much value that is placed around food in French culture, and that's from the way that the food is grown. It's from the way that you purchase it, to the way that you prepare it, to the way that you consume it. There's a real respect and honor that is paid to food from start to finish. And I think that gets missed a lot in American culture, at least. We want things that are convenient. We want things that are fast. Want things that we don't really have to think about. We don't spend a lot of time making food, and we also don't spend a lot of time actually eating it. We're, grabbing something that we can eat in the car on our way to something. We're eating something while we're watching TV or while we're working at our desk. There's not this element of, I'm going to take the time to make something and then I'm going to take the time to eat it. And that's something that I really see exemplified in France. And in terms of hospitality, when a French person invites you into their home, it's this lavish experience where regardless of how much they have, there's this generosity in it, not only with their food and their drink, but then also their time. And I think that that's something that's really beautiful and also creates just daily moments for people to sit down and be nourished, for people to sit down and to connect around the table, for people to engage in conversation, for people to take a break from their work and to enjoy being in cafes, to enjoy being around friends, to enjoy being in a different setting, to have someone feed you or to go home and feed yourself and get to eat with your family. And you see that through the artistry and the time and the consideration in the ingredients that are available and that are being used. The bread, the produce, the meat, the cheese, the butter, the dairy products, the pastries, the desserts. Like, there's just this pride and then this recognition of what a gift food is, and not only to give, but also to receive. And I remember something that just has always stuck with me in the little town that I lived in the Burgundy region of France. There was a separate trash disposal in the city that was just for leftover bread. It was considered incredibly offensive to throw bread away because that was someone's art, and how disgraceful it is to throw someone's art in the trash. So if there was leftover bread, then that was something that had a separate disposal so that it could actually go to farm animals. It was being repurposed. It wasn't something that was just tossed. And that mentality won, but then that the whole town is behind that. There's no disregard of that because it's felt, it's seen, it's experienced. And that just really stood out to me and is something that I've carried with me, that idea of the food that I'm making. I'm viewing that as art. I'm viewing that as something that I put my time into, that I put my energy into, that I put my heart into. I created something with my hands, and I did it with the purpose of bringing enjoyment to the person who received it. And then how exciting it is. That's my favorite thing about having an open kitchen in this space, is actually getting to see people receive that food and be excited about it and eat it. And you can see the delight on someone's face when it just kind of satisfies all of their senses. And I think that the French do a really good job of carving out the time to actually do that. And then lastly, point number 4, and also to answer the question at the beginning of this video, who here speaks French? Not really any of us. I speak a very little bit. I understand more, but I'm embarrassed at the level of my French, and that's something that's on my bucket list, is to eventually master the language. So the last thing is just recognizing the sacredness that comes with food and sitting around the table and eating food, and the barriers that food breaks down when someone feels comfortable, when they feel satisfied, when they feel nourished, when they feel taken care of, when you're not stressed about what you're going to eat, when you're not wondering or worrying if you're going to be full. The ability to let your guard down and actually be yourself and to be present, and then to engage with the other people around you, creates, I think, some really powerful and dynamic shifts and opportunities within our society and our culture that I personally think we as Americans miss out on a lot. And I wonder about how our world and our culture would look different if we sat down to eat meals together more. I think there's a lot of power to it. It reminds us of our humanity. I think food is a great equalizer. Everyone needs to eat. There's beauty in recognizing that it's incredibly practical. We need the nutrients, but it also is incredibly pleasurable. And there's so much joy and delight that can come from having an amazing meal or food experience. It awakens you to the moment. It allows you to experience sensations that you haven't maybe experienced before, to taste new flavors, to be excited, to be surprised, to feel comforted. There's such an emotional connection to food, and that's not a bad thing. That's a really good thing. And I think that the French, you see that on such a daily and regular basis, that people are truly enjoying and making time to enjoy their food, and that's woven into the fabric and the culture of France and the French people. So that's all. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time. Chez, Genèse, teammates, your key word for this week in honor of my very favorite French sandwich is jamon beurre.